Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for joining us at this Revs Origins Day. We're really pleased to have so many different people involved in the day, and none more so than Richard Day, who joins us from his home. Richard is former curator of the Bugatti Trust, long time involvement with Bugattis, and has recently come back to the Trust as a trustee member. Which is brilliant. And Richard has very, very kindly given his time so that we can know a little more about this amazing man and his history. Some of us might think of Bugattis as the modern 200-mile-an-hour machines, but actually, of course, they go right back with this amazing history, perhaps most famously for the Type 35 racing cars that won races like the Targa Florio 4 or 5 years on the run, and also the first Monaco Grand Prix in 1929. Incredible cars, but of course Bugatti's history is much more varied. There are many more machines that bear his hallmark, and we thought it would be great to hear from Richard a little more about the early history and the origins. So Richard, thank you so much for joining us today. And giving up your time. It's very good of you. If you could start perhaps by telling us something of Bugatti the man and his family, because he comes from quite an incredible family, doesn't he?
Yes. Well, hello, Adam. Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to fill in a few bits that perhaps are a little bit less well known than the Type 35 Bugatti, for instance. I go back to Ettore Bugatti's father, Carlo, who was based near Milan. They were Italian. It was a rather incredible family. It was, you would say, a little bit bohemian. Carlo was an artist. He was his thinking was extremely broad. So in those days, which we're probably talking about the 1880s and 1890s, when Carlo was productive, there wasn't such a distinction between the arts and the sciences, at least in his mind, and he didn't specialize. So his art was very broad, and it covered music and painting and sculpture, and he's most famous perhaps for producing rather bizarre furniture, the designs, and he actually built the prototypes of his furniture pieces in his own workshop at his home. And that home became a hub, you could say, a bit of an artistic hub where famous artists, all sorts of people and artists used to congregate. And I think that his two sons, Ettore and Rembrandt, were really imbued with this artistic freedom. And I'm sure that they worked alongside him in his workshop, producing their own, in their childhood, their own versions of things. And it was expected by Carlo that his sons would become great artists. Maybe the fact that he christened one of them after such a famous artist, something gives you something of a clue. In fact, when they were young, the two boys produced their own work. And it became obvious to the elder one, Ettore, that his younger brother had much more talent in his fingertips when it came to producing animal sculptures. And I think Ettore was kind of put off by that and more inclined to follow his own path, which was more to do with engineering. And we think that he was fascinated by the more modern technologies, the steam age and what we would call the Victorian era of the Industrial Revolution and so on. And
jumping ahead a little, obviously we know him for those cars with the horseshoe radiators, the Type 35, the Type 59, the Royale, you know, there's so many. But obviously
yes.
it started with something, I mean, we've talked about a couple of
well, yes.
And we were going to talk about Type 2, which was the first.
Yeah, he gave his car designs type numbers, and we don't know much about Type 1, but the Type 2 was a car that he built himself, which is amazing. In other words, producing his own patterns, getting casting cars, putting it all together.
Right.
And it was a proper car. It had an inline 4, water-cooled 4 in the front. It was rear-wheel drive, chain drive, which was normal, of course.
Yeah.
It had Ackerman steering. It had the layout of the car was, you could say, of all the different formats of car design at that time, in 1900. So that's when I'm talking about.
Goodness.
It was very successful.
Yeah.
And he entered it for a competition, an exhibition in Milan, and won a big silver cup.
Wow.
And that set him on a path, because my next chapter is De Dietrich. De Dietrich was an industrial, very large factory, foundry in Alsace, which was then part of France. And Eugène de Dietrich, one of the family people that ran the company, saw the Type 2 at the Milan exhibition and gave Ettore the opportunity to come and work at De Dietrich and build versions of his Type 2. So the young, well, he was only 20 and too young to sign the contract. So Carlo, his father, had to sign the contract for De Dietrich. And Ettore went up to Reichshofen to work in the De Dietrich factory. He set up his own drawing office and produced the designs for 3 cars and a motor bus. And the cars were 16 horsepower road car, a 24 horsepower road car. Just give you the horsepower is a bit confusing because of different people use it in different ways. But to give you an idea, the 16 horsepower road car was 5.3 litres.
Goodness.
The 24 horsepower road car was 7.4 litres. And the big racing car that was the De Dietrich racing car was 13 litres. And those were Bugatti's Types 3, Type 4 and Type 5 in order. Yeah. We don't know anything about the bus. I don't think they were ever produced. But Bugatti's real passion, as well as the design of, down to the last little detail of these cars, was the racing. And there were 2 of the racing cars built, the big 13-litre cars, and they were raced, and with some success.
13 litres, I mean, they're dinner plate piston size, aren't they, really?
Yes, 160 millimetres diameter. So, you know, that is huge.
And then we
built.
Go on, sorry, yeah.
I've actually built a replica of the big Type 5 racing car, which perhaps I have a photo. But yeah, earlier, Ettore Bugatti had financial support from another aristocratic family, a Gulinelli family of Milan, and left them when that project came to an end, kind of thing. And eventually the De Dietrich project came to an end. It was not any sort of commercial success for De Dietrich, and Bugatti had to move on. So it was a very amicable arrangement. He wasn't kind of kicked out or anything, but they didn't continue with him.
Right.
And he then worked for other people, Emil Mattis and Deutz, and those were the types 6 and 7, and the Deutz was his own Bugatti car was the Type 8. But then, and the Deutz was the Type 9 as well. But he then built an absolute little marvelous jewel of a car, which was his Type 10. It was a prototype. You would nowadays call it perhaps a concept car. It was a totally different thing from these large-engined, very lightweight cars that must have been kind of incredibly dangerous. Minimal in the way of brakes, for instance. And you know, once you've got them going at 80 miles an hour, you hoped that nothing would stop them too suddenly. But then this little Type 10 was only 1,100, less than 1,200 cc's, which was kind of minute as a proper car. There were little cars, but they were usually singles or whatever. But this was a proper car, water-cooled, inline 4, with overhead valves. In fact, had an overhead camshaft, and everything, it ticked all the boxes. Everything was right. Had a proper differential, back axle, and he drove it around and he was pleased with it, and that was the model that he used as the basis of his own production. And he then had the opportunity to buy some buildings at Molsheim, still in Alsace, and he set up his company. And in 1910, really, actually just about started in 1909, but in 1910 he started production of his cars, which were types 13, 15 and 17, and they were the success that the whole Bugatti industrial concern was based on. So that's what I say was...
Yeah, and the story goes on, because I mean there are so many iconic cars that bear his name, so many other things that he designed, railways, locomotives. He designed an aeroplane. I mean, there was just ships. I mean, you know, he may not have been an artist in the same way that perhaps Rembrandt and his father Carlo were, but he was an artist in a different way. And it would be fair to say, yeah, it would be fair to say that his cars were jewel-like almost, weren't they, in their execution? Richard, we've come to the end of 10 minutes. Would you believe it? But I just a huge thank you for giving up your time, and I know we've spent a bit of time chatting before on the phone as well. Just very quickly, if people want to find out more, obviously when COVID allows, the Trust is open for people to go and see, and has exhibitions there, and has a very good library as well, doesn't it?
Yes, the Trust is really an archive and a place where people can carry out research, and they can either go there or they can get in touch by whatever means, email, phone, or whatever. And the people there will do their best, their absolute best to help. And then certainly whenever we can visit places, you can go and visit what's a relatively small exhibition and see some of these amazing Bugatti projects, the other things apart from motor cars. But we don't forget the Bugatti Trust, Ettore Bugatti's son, Jean, who was really taking over the company in the later 1930s. And the Bugatti Trust covers that whole story of the Ettore and Jean Bugatti. Brilliant. So people will be welcome there.
Brilliant. And it's at the foot of Prescott Hill. I mean, it's about as picturesque as you could want, really. Absolutely. Isn't it?
Wonderful place to visit.
Yes. So, folks, thank you very much. Richard, thank you again for giving up your time today. and
well, thank you, Adam. Enjoyed it.
Starting us on a kind of fascinating journey of discovery, really, I think.
Yeah.
So thank you. Brilliant.
Thank you. Okay.
See you.